What I found unfair about the comments is to compare us to Mexico. And I can tell you, Canada is no Mexico.
Este señor es el primer ministro de Ontario. Dijo esto después de que Trump hablara de que impondría a Canadá también los aranceles de 25% como México. Me bastó que 15 minutos o menos para hacer un análisis de lo que está pasando actualmente en Canadá, solo este año.
I found his comments unfair. I found him insulting. It's like a family member stabbing you right in the heart.
Anti-NATO and pro-Palestine protests in Montreal led to violent confrontations. Accusations of anti-Semitism,
a radical anti-Semitic, anti-Canadian mob,
and destruction. The events became a viral talking point.
No justice, no peace, they say. This is their reasonings for burning down the streets of Montreal.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also posted a video showing Justin Trudeau at a Taylor Swift concert while, quote, Montreal burned.
In polls, 2/3 of Canadians think that everything in the country is broken, and they feel deeply pessimistic about the economic situation and their quality of life. But what's going on? Why do Canadians feel so overwhelmingly unhappy with the state of their country, and how bad it all really is? This is the dark side of Canada. Let's dig a little deeper into how people in Canada are actually feeling, because while the general stereotype is of Canadians as happy and cheerful, the mood in the country at this point could not be any more different. Surveys show that over half of Canadians are angry about the way that their country is managed, and 2/3 think that Canada is deeply broken, and they're worried about the economy, and about being able to even afford their everyday needs. And other data confirms this mix of depression, anger, and pessimism.
So the high cost of living is just one reason more Canadians are choosing to live abroad. There's a spike in the number of people making a move. CTV's Kamal Karmali tells us which countries have the biggest Canadian expat populations and what challenges they face when they move.
More and more Canadians are waving goodbye to their homeland.
For the size of our population, there's a huge amount of Canadians kind of no matter where I go.
And moving abroad, uprooting for reasons including housing and healthcare.
I've been priced out of my own country. And on top of that, the waits for services, for example, especially medical services, is really, really pathetic.
The latest data estimates around 4 million Canadians live abroad, roughly 11% of the country's population. That number, a huge increase, a 36% jump from the number of Canadians who lived elsewhere in 1990. More than 1 million Canadians, that's over 1/3, live in the U.S., with 300,000 in Hong Kong and more than 70,000 in the United States.
We reviewed and verified social media from the night of the riot and obtained exclusive footage to show how it unfolded. Let's map it out. On Thursday, students from multiple colleges and universities kicked off 2 days of pro-Palestine protests inside campus buildings and on the streets. This woman, who is not a student, is spotted giving a Nazi salute.
Final solution is coming your way.
2 days later, she's identified as the owner of 2 Second Cup coffee franchises, and the company closes her cafes. The student protests continue into Friday and join up with anti-NATO demonstrations organized by Divest for Palestine and the convergence of anti-capitalist struggles.
Most Canadians are dissatisfied with their own country, and they feel that their lives used to be a lot better, and that the services in Canada have gotten significantly worse. And whichever poll or survey you pick, the picture is basically the same, and not pretty. Canadians feel more concerned and negative about their economy and their personal quality of life than people in almost any other developed country. And the overall sentiment of how people feel about Canada is worse than at any point in recent history. Here's what's going on. So you might have heard by now that much of the world is going through a housing crisis, but wherever you are, it's still probably not as bad as in Canada, which today is one of the least affordable housing markets in the world. In the past 10 years, the value of an average Canadian home has more than doubled, with rent prices growing at a similar rate, which makes it extremely hard to afford a rental property and almost impossible to actually buy a home. In Toronto, the average resident spends 120% of their income on rent, and if you want to buy a property in Vancouver, you need to be making at least $250,000 to even qualify for a mortgage. In other words, buying a property in Canada is now a possibility only for people with exceptionally high income, and even they struggle to afford the incredibly high mortgage payments, which is why Canada has the highest household debt of all of the G7 countries, and why its situation has been described as the largest housing bubble of all time.
Some experts are now predicting the housing and health crises will continue to push Canadians to other countries if change doesn't happen soon.
But what's happening in Canada that could be making people feel this way? Well, even though the country has a reputation for being almost perfect, at a closer look, this image starts to unravel pretty quick.
United Kingdom.
It's much more difficult to climb up in Canada than it is in the United States.
Greg Lewis moved to California and hasn't looked back. Do you feel forgotten?
Yeah, and I wasn't really worried about it. It didn't affect me in any way. But again, there's no two-way connection.
The report from McGill Institute for the Study of Canada says Canadians abroad have received little attention, from consular services to healthcare, taxation, and community building. The diaspora has been largely left to its own devices.
Auto theft that has run rampant under this Prime Minister. He's now throwing a cape over his back, claiming that he's the hero on auto theft, but it's actually tripled in Toronto. And it's up by 100% in Montreal after he brought in catch and release and house arrest for car thieves, and after his incompetence allowed our ports to spin out of control and our cars to be exported to overseas crime and terror networks? Why doesn't he reverse his policies instead of another meeting?
So I know you've probably heard about Canada's real estate issue before, and all around the world this is happening. It's just in Canada it seems to be the worst by quite a bit.
Roughly 800 people first gather at the Place des Arts. At 6:25 p.m., as the crowd moves down Saint-Urbain, things appear to escalate. Police try to grab a banner from protesters and fire tear gas, but they keep moving. As you can see from multiple angles, as often
People, Canada still has high rates of immigration. Even the immigrants are not really buying the Canadian dream anymore, as studies show that an increasing number of immigrants choose to voluntarily leave Canada due to dissatisfaction with the quality of life and economic opportunities.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is a serious situation. Canadians are concerned about this, and the Conservative leader just chooses to whip out his empty slogans and continue to blame everyone. Well, we're getting to work. We're pulling together stakeholders and leaders from across the government from across governments to look at what more we can do. We've seen successes. CBSA agents have intercepted over 1,600 stolen cars last year in 2023, but there's more to do. We're going to continue to make the steady work and investments necessary to keep Canadians safe and to keep crime down.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Keep crime down. Crime is way up. Violent crime is up 40% under this Prime Minister. And today he had his ministers hold a big press conference as their solution. And in it, they put out a press release that said, and I quote, "In 2022, approximately 9,600 vehicles were stolen in the Toronto area alone, representing a 300% increase since 2015. End quote. What happened in 2015? I know, he happened, Mr. Speaker. How can we make him unhappen and stop the crime?